I still remember the way the air smelled. That summer. Salt, sunscreen, and the faint trace of gasoline from the jet skis out on the water. It was the kind of scent that told you life hadn't really begun yet, that you were standing on the edge of something bigger. I was 18, freshly graduated, and convinced that the world was waiting for me to make my move. But for one last week, before college, the world shrank down to a single beachside hotel room, my best friend, and a horizon that looked like could stretch forever. His family had invited me along on their annual beach trip, a tradition I'd heard about for years but had never been part of. His parents were easygoing. His little sister too busy with her phone to care that two almost adults were tagging along. For me, it felt like an escape. No curfews, no expectations. No. What's your major going to be? Just 7 days of freedom and friendship. We shared a small hotel room with 2 twin beds. Sand already gathering on the carpet by the first evening. The balcony faced the ocean, and when the sliding glass door was open, you could hear the rhythmic crash of the waves, constant and hypnotic. We spent our days sunburning at the beach, laughing too loud, pretending we weren't both terrified about what came next. That first night, we stayed up talking until we forgot what time it was. We lay on our separate beds, lights off, only the soft glow from the TV reflecting off the walls. It was one of those conversations that wandered everywhere. Girls we liked, music, what kind of people we wanted to be once we left home. The words came easily, the laughter even easier. We joked about who would survive college life better, who'd have the worst dorm roommate, who'd get homesick first. It was the kind of simple banter we'd shared 1,000 times before. But underneath it was something new, a quiet awareness that this might be one of the last nights where nothing had to change. At one point there was a lull in the conversation. He sighed, the kind of deep exhale that feels like it carries every thought a person doesn't know how to say. You ever think about how different it's all going to be? Every day, I admitted. We both went quiet. The sound of the ocean filled the room like static. Somewhere outside, someone was laughing on a nearby balcony. The air conditioner hummed soft and steady. I'm going to miss this, he said after a while. What? Sand in our shoes? He laughed. Nah, I mean this. Just us hanging out. Without thinking about everything else. There was something in his tone, something half buried between nostalgia and fear that made me turn my head toward his silhouette in the dark. Couldn't see his face, but I could feel him thinking the way you can feel lightning in the air before it strikes. I'll miss it too, I said quietly. The words lingered longer than they should. It wasn't a confession, but it was close to one. We talked some more about the ocean, about childhood summers, about the way time was already slipping through our fingers. He told me about a girl he liked back home, someone he never got the courage to ask out. Teased him for it, but something in me softened when I realized how shy he really was under all his confidence. It was strange. He'd been my friend for years, but that week I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way his voice lowered when he was tired. The way his laugh could fill a whole room. The quiet moments when he wasn't joking or performing for anyone. When his guard was completely down, we fell into an easy rhythm over the next few days. We'd wake up late, grab cheap breakfast, sandwiches, and head straight for the beach. We raced each other in the waves, got buried in sand by his sister, and took turns skipping rocks that barely made it 2 feet before sinking. The kind of dumb, aimless fun that only feels special once it's over. Sometimes when the afternoon heat grew unbearable, we'd head back to the room still dripping from the ocean and collapse on the beds. We talk about nothing, sports, food, random stuff, but beneath it was that same current of connection I couldn't ignore. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It was something quieter, deeper, like being fully understood for the first time and not knowing what to do with that feeling. On the third night, his parents took the family out for dinner and we stayed behind, claiming we were too tired. We ordered pizza instead and sat out on the balcony. As the sun disappeared into the ocean, the light turned everything gold, even the parts of the hotel that were falling apart. You ever think about how this might be the best time of our lives? He wiping pizza grease on a napkin. I laughed. You sound like my dad. He smirked. Nah, seriously, like, everything feels simple right now. No jobs, no bills, no whatever adulthood is supposed to be. I don't think it gets better, I said. Just different. He nodded, leaning back in his chair. Guess I just don't want to forget this. The way he said it so softly made me want to freeze the moment. The laughter, the breeze, the warmth of the night. All felt fragile, like it could vanish if either of us moved too suddenly. Later, when we went back inside, he fell asleep first. I lay awake listening to the sound of his steady breathing from the other bed. Moonlight slipped through the blinds and drew pale lines across the sheets. The waves outside seemed slower now, quieter, like they too were falling asleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand the feeling sitting in my chest. It was an attraction, not in any way I knew. It was something gentler, a kind of longing, maybe for the moment itself, for him, for the safety I felt when we were just two kids against the world. Somewhere between the sound of the ocean and his soft snoring, realized how rare it was to feel completely at ease with another person, to not need words or masks or explanations, to simply exist side by side. I didn't know it then, but that week would carve itself into me. Every conversation, every laugh, every look across the dim hotel room, it would all come back to me in the years ahead, when college got lonely and life got loud. That night, as the moonlight cut through the blinds and the air smelled faintly of salt, I felt something I couldn't quite name. It was new and terrifying and beautiful all at once. Maybe it was, well, maybe it was just the innocence of a summer we both knew couldn't last. But in that moment, none of it mattered. It was just me, him, and the sound of the waves. Two friends lying awake, not realizing that the world had already started to change. The next morning started with sunlight pouring through the thin curtains, turning the hotel room a soft shade of gold. I woke to the sound of waves and the faint hum of his electric razor in the bathroom. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I remembered the ocean, the laughter, the late-night talk that had stretched until we both fallen silent. When he came out, towel draped around his shoulders, he grinned. You snore, by the way. Do not, I muttered, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Pretty sure the walls shook, he teased, tossing a wet washcloth at me. Threw it back and it hit him square in the chest. Just like that. The easy laughter returned, but underneath it was something quieter. The kind of silence that sits between words, not uncomfortable but noticeable. We both avoided mentioning how close we'd gotten the night before, how his voice had sounded when he'd said, I'll miss this. Maybe we didn't want to risk naming what we didn't yet understand. After breakfast, his parents planned to check out a tourist spot in town, but we decided to stay behind. We told them we wanted to hit the beach early. Really, we just wanted time to ourselves again. Changing into swim trunks felt oddly awkward that morning. We'd done it 1,000 times before, locker rooms, gym, class, summer pool days, but now it felt different. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just teenage awkwardness, but every second felt magnified. He pulled his shirt over his head effortlessly, tan lines catching the morning light. I looked away too fast, like my eyes had betrayed me. When it was my turn to change, I hesitated a beat too long before unbuttoning my jeans. He must have noticed, because he laughed. Dude, relax. I've seen you in swim trunks before, he said, grinning. Yeah, I said, forcing a laugh, though my heartbeat didn't match my tone. He opened the balcony door to check the weather. A warm gust rolled in, carrying salt and the faint cries of seagulls. For a moment, the wind fluttered the curtain against his arm, and I caught myself noticing how comfortable he looked, barefoot, relaxed, at ease in his own skin. Didn't know what to do with that feeling. It wasn't attraction exactly. It was admiration mixed with confusion, like watching sunlight dance on water, and not knowing why it held your gaze so long. We spent the afternoon down by the shoreline, the heat baking the sand until it almost burned. The beach was crowded but not overwhelming. We raced each other to the waves, diving into the surf with childish laughter. He tackled me once, dragging me under the water, and we surfaced laughing, spitting out Salt and shouting mock threats. Oh, right, all right, you win, I said, raising my hands in surrender. It grinned triumphantly. Knew you'd give up. First, I splashed him in retaliation, and soon it turned into an all-out war. Splashing, diving, tackling, rolling through the shallow waves until we were both out of breath. When we finally collapsed onto the sand, our shoulders touched as we lay staring up at the sky. I could feel the warmth of his arm against mine, the slight rise and fall of his breathing. Man, we're going to miss this, he said, voice lazy from the sun. I turned my head. You're still thinking about that? Yeah, he admitted, squinting at the clouds. Just weird to think we'll be living in different cities, new people, new routines. What if we stop talking as much? That won't happen, I said quickly. We're too close for that, he smiled. Yeah, I guess you're right. But something about the way he said it felt like he was trying to convince himself, too. That evening, the sky turned into a painting. Orange, pink, and violet. Streaks fading into the water. We walked barefoot along the beach, each carrying our flip-flops, the wet sand cool beneath our feet. The tide pulled at the shore in soft rhythm like the ocean itself was breathing. We didn't say much. We didn't have to. The silence between us had started to feel like a kind of language. Back at the hotel, after his family went to bed, we found ourselves once again sitting on our separate beds, talking in the dark. The only light came from the gap in the blinds, cutting pale stripes across the room. He was flipping through his phone, scrolling without really looking. You ever think about how hard it is to find people who actually get you? He asked. Suddenly, I turned toward him. What do you mean? I don't know. Like you can hang out with a bunch of people, but it doesn't mean you connect with them, you know. Like they don't really see who you are. I nodded. Yeah, I think about that a lot. He looked up, meeting my eyes in the dim light. You're probably the only person who actually knows me. Something about hearing that hit me harder than I expected. Maybe because I felt the same way but never said it out loud. Swallowed. You too. He smiled faintly. Good. Then I guess I'm not totally alone in that. The conversation drifted again. College plans, fears, things we'd never admitted to anyone else. He confessed he was terrified of not fitting in, of getting lost in a sea of new faces. Told him I worried about being forgotten, about people moving on without me. Then came the part one hadn't planned to say. I'm scared. We'll drift apart, I admitted, voice low. He looked surprised, then thoughtful. We won't, he said firmly. I promise. We'll always be close. The confidence in his voice made me believe it almost. For a while neither of us spoke. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the distant waves, the quiet rhythm of his breathing. Hey, he said softly after a while. Thanks for coming this week. I smiled in the dark. Wouldn't have missed it. Good, he said, 'cause it wouldn't have been the same without you. Something warm bloomed in my chest at that. Quiet but steady. He rolled onto his side, facing away from me. Night, man. Night. Stayed awake for a while, staring at the faint light bleeding through the blinds. Outside, the ocean kept whispering to the shore, patient and endless. Struck me then that no one had ever made me feel the way he did, like I was truly seen, truly known. Friendship wasn't supposed to feel this intense, was it? No one had ever warned me that it could. I didn't have a name for it, and maybe that was what made it beautiful. All I knew was that as I lay there listening to the sound of his breathing beside me, the world outside the hotel room felt impossibly far away. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted it to come back. By the fourth night, the weather changed. The forecast had promised clear skies all week, but the ocean had other plans. Dark clouds rolled in by late afternoon, swallowing the horizon in slow, heavy waves. The air smelled like metal and salt, the kind of scent that comes right before the sky breaks open. By evening, thunder grumbled somewhere out at sea, and rain hammered against the hotel windows with the kind of persistence that told you it wasn't going to stop soon. The beach emptied, the pool closed, and even the boardwalk fell silent under the storm's roar. His family huddled in the adjoining suite, watching an old movie with the volume too high. He and I on The other hand were stuck in our own little world, restless and bored. The power flickered once but held. Our phones barely had signal. I lay on my bed tossing a baseball in the air while he scrolled through his phone clearly. Out of things to look at. Man, I hate sitting still, he groaned, tossing his phone onto the nightstand. Welcome to adulthood, I joked. It's mostly sitting still and pretending it's fine. He laughed, but it faded quickly. We could play cards or something. I pointed at the tiny table by the balcony. Yeah, let's play Go Fish while the world floods outside. He threw a pillow at me. All right, comedian. What do you suggest? The idea hit me before I could think it through. Truth or dare? He arched an eyebrow. What are we, 12? Fine, then be bored, I said, pretending to stretch dramatically on the bed. Beat passed before I heard him say, all right, deal. But no backing out once it starts. I grinned. You're on. First, it was exactly what you'd expect. Harmless, funny, dumb. I dared him to do 10 push-ups in the dark. He dared me to call room service and ask if they sold batteries for a model submarine. We both lost it laughing when the confused woman on the other end said she'd check with the front desk. Then came the truths. Silly ones at first. Who was your first crush? What's the dumbest lie you've ever told your parents? The kind of stuff we already half knew about each other. But somewhere between the laughter and thunder, the question started changing. He leaned back on his bed, staring at the ceiling, his voice quieter now. All right, my turn. What's your biggest fear? The question caught me off guard. I wasn't sure how we'd gone from jokes to soul-searching. Hesitated. I don't know. Maybe not being enough. For my family, for the people I care about. He turned his head toward me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. That's a solid answer. Your turn, I said, trying to deflect. It was quiet for a long time, I guess. Ending up alone, like surrounded by people but still alone. The storm outside punctuated his words with a crack of thunder. That's pretty deep. For a rainy night, I said, but I didn't smile. He shrugged. It's been on my mind lately. We both fell silent. The sound of rain filling the space between. Something about the moment felt different. The jokes were gone. All that was left was the truth. After a while, he spoke again. Truth or dare? Truth? I said. He looked at me, eyes curious but unsure. You ever had feelings you couldn't explain? The question hung in the air. My first instinct was to laugh it off, but the way he said it, slow, thoughtful, made me pause. Yeah, I admitted finally. Few times, he nodded, waiting. Like I searched for the right words. Sometimes I care about people more than I'm supposed to. Like I don't know where the line is between friendship and something else. It's confusing. The room went still again. He studied me in that quiet, searching way he did sometimes, like he was trying to read between my words. That's not weird, he said after a moment. I get it. Yeah, he said softly. I think I felt that too. We both smiled, but it wasn't the usual kind. It was smaller, quieter. The rain outside grew heavier, drowning out the sound of the TV in the next room. Watched a droplet slide down the window, tracing the faint reflection of us in the glass. 2 figures sitting in dim light, talking about things that suddenly felt too big for the walls around us. When it was my turn again, I asked, what do you miss most about being a kid? He laughed quietly. Probably not having to explain myself. Like when you're a kid, you can just feel stuff. Happy, sad, angry, and no one asks why. Now it's like you've got to justify everything you feel. I nodded slowly. Yeah, like we all grew up and started building fences around our emotions. Exactly, he said, looking at me like I just read his thoughts aloud. Sometimes I miss not overthinking. Leaned back against the headboard, pulling my knees up. I don't think I've ever felt this close to anyone before, I said before I could stop myself. Not even people I've dated. He laughed softly, not mocking, more like he was trying to hide something. Careful, you're going to make me blush. I'm serious. I said, it's weird, right? You hang out with someone for years and then suddenly you realize you actually know them. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Yeah, he said, quietly. I feel the same way. The thunder rolled again closer this time. The light flickered once more before steadying. His face was half lit by the TV, the shadows cutting across his cheekbones. He looked thoughtful, maybe even troubled. I wanted to ask what he was thinking, but I didn't. Something about the atmosphere told me not to. After a long pause, he said, "Your turn. Truth or dare?" Truth? He hesitated, tapping his fingers on his knee. When you said you've never felt this close to anyone, did you mean it? I nodded. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's like most people only know the version of me I let them see. But you've seen all of it. The dumb parts, the angry parts, the scared parts. And you never made me feel weird about it. He didn't look at me right away. He just nodded, still staring at the window. That's good to know. Then, softly, same here. The silence after that felt heavier but not uncomfortable, just charged, like we were both aware of something neither of us could name. The rain eased a little, turning from a downpour to a gentle patter. The air smelled cleaner, cooler. Eventually he stood up and stretched. Man, that got serious fast, he said, his voice light again, almost forced. Laughed quietly. Yeah, I guess I should have picked dare, he smirked. Next round, I'm making you do something dumb. Deal? I said, though we both knew the game was over. He turned off the TV, leaving the room in soft darkness. I lay down on my bed, watching the faint blue light of his phone glow for a few seconds before fading. Hey, he said suddenly, voice quiet in the dark. Yeah, this is going to sound weird, but thanks for being real. Smiled into the dark. Anytime there was a pause, then softer than before, he said, you ever think maybe people like us just understand each other differently? I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt true. Yeah, I think maybe we do. The rain continued its quiet rhythm against the blast. I closed my eyes, feeling the echo of his words linger long after the conversation ended. That night the world outside was wild and restless. But inside that room everything felt still. Two friends, a storm and a truth neither of us were ready to name. That night the storm had passed, but it left behind a silence that felt almost heavier than the thunder. The hotel's walls were thin, and through them I could hear the faint hum of the building settling, the muffled voice of a television in another room, the distant crash of waves still restless from the when everything felt both still and alive, like the world was holding its breath. He was lying on his bed, scrolling through his phone again, but he wasn't really paying attention to it. Every few minutes he'd lock the screen, toss the phone onto his stomach, then pick it up again like it might suddenly tell him something new. I was pretending to read, but my eyes hadn't moved down the page in 20 minutes. The quiet stretched between us, not tense, but charged. All evening I'd been replaying our truth or dare conversation in my head. The way his eyes had softened when I said he was the only person who really knew me. The way he'd gone quiet after saying he felt the same. Now sitting in that dimly lit room with him only a few feet away, it felt impossible to ignore the weight of everything unsaid. You think the beach will open again tomorrow? He asked finally, his voice low and a little hoarse from the long day. Yeah, I said, closing my book. The storm's gone. Guess we got lucky. Yeah. He turned his head toward the ceiling. Lucky. He said it like he wasn't sure he believed it. For a while, we talked about nothing. Plans for the morning. Random memories from high school. Little stories about people we used to hang out with. But each time there was a pause, it lingered too long. The air between us had changed, and we both felt it, even if neither of us said so. When the conversation drifted toward college again, something softer crept into his tone. You ever worry people are going to see you differently? Like that? You'll try to be someone you're not, just to fit in all the time? I admitted, it's like I know who I am, but I also know how easily that can get lost. He nodded, eyes distant. Yeah, I feel that. He sat up, elbows on his knees, staring down at the carpet. Sometimes I wonder if people really like me, or if they just like the version of me I make easy to be around. His words hit too close to home. I think we all do that. I said, we're a version of ourselves that people can handle. It looked up, meeting my eyes. Yeah, but you don't. I blinked. What do you mean? He shrugged. You don't fake it. You're just you. Even when it's awkward, I kind of envy that. I didn't know what to say. My instinct was to make a joke, to deflect, but something about his tone stopped me. Thanks, I said quietly. That means more than you think. He smiled, small and genuine, then lay back, down on his bed. The room felt different. Again, like something had shifted, but in a way that didn't scare me. After a while, he broke the silence again. Can I ask you something weird? Sure, he hesitated. Do you ever look in the mirror and not recognize yourself? Like, not in a physical way, just you look and think, who is that? I thought about it. Yeah, I said softly. Especially lately. He nodded. Same. He rolled onto his side facing me. His voice dropped lower. You ever feel like you're changing and don't know into what? I met his gaze in the half-light. Yeah, maybe. That's just part of growing up. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, almost a whisper, yeah, maybe. The rain had stopped completely now. The air was still damp, heavy with salt. Outside, the moon peeked through thinning clouds, its light sliding through the slats of the blinds and painting thin silver lines across the room, across his face, his hands, the empty space between us. He looked peaceful and uncertain all at once. Turned off my lamp in the darkness. Settled around us, broken only by the rhythmic pulse of the waves. We lay there for a while, breathing in sync, neither of us moving. I don't know what made me say it, but I did. Hey, yeah, I meant what I said earlier about you being the only person who really knows me. For a few seconds he didn't respond, then quietly, yeah, me too. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward anymore. It was warm. But inside that warmth was something else too. Something that hummed beneath the surface like electricity. I rolled onto my side facing him, though I could barely see his face. The space between our beds felt smaller than it ever had. I don't really know what's happening to us, I said softly. But it feels like everything's changing. He let out a slow breath. Yeah, I feel it too. And then, without planning, without thought, something small happened. A shift in air, a movement too quick to prepare for. His hand brushed mine as he reached across the narrow gap between the beds. Maybe it was accidental. Maybe not. But the touch stopped everything. It was so light I could have imagined it. Just the faint press of his fingers grazing my skin. But the shock of it, gentle, real, froze me in place. Neither of us pulled away. In that second, the whole world narrowed down to a heartbeat. The sound of waves faded. The air conditioner vanished. All I could hear was the sound of our breathing. Slow, uneven, matching. He didn't look at me and I didn't look at him. We just stayed there, suspended in that quiet space where time forgot to move. My skin tingled where he touched me. Pulse of warmth spreading through my chest. Wasn't lust, not even close. Was connection, raw and human and terrifying. In its honesty, he whispered, barely audible, sorry. It's okay, I said, though I wasn't sure what I was forgiving him for. Another pause, then even quieter. I don't know why that happened. Me neither, I said. But it's fine. He finally turned his head just enough for me to see the outline of his face in the moonlight. His expression was unreadable, half nervous, half searching. He began, then stopped. Never mind. What? I asked. He shook his head. Let's just not overthink it. Okay, I nodded slowly, though my heart was still racing. Yeah. Okay. He rolled over, facing the wall. Good night. Good night, I said, but my voice sounded different, smaller. I lay there for a long time after that, eyes open, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. Every few minutes I'd hear him breathe deep, steady, like he was trying to convince himself to sleep. But I knew he wasn't asleep. I wasn't either. That tiny, unplanned moment had broken something open, something we couldn't put back. And even though nothing more had happened, it felt like everything had. There was no guilt, not yet, just confusion and a strange, fragile peace. In the quiet, I listened to the ocean, to his breathing, to the faint rustle of sheets when he shifted on the other bed. I thought about how Simple it had all been just a few days ago. 2 friends, a beach trip, laughter. Without thought. And now here we were. Lying in the dark, caught between what we were and something new neither of us had the courage to name. Outside, the waves finally calmed inside. My heartbeat didn't. The morning after was quiet, too quiet. When I woke up, sunlight was spilling through the blinds, again painting thin golden lines across the floor. The air smelled faintly of salt and leftover takeout. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. There was something unspoken in the room now, something hovering between us like static that neither of us could switch off. He was already awake, sitting at the edge of his bed, tying his shoelaces. "Morning," he said, voice casual, eyes fixed on the floor. "Morning," I replied, trying to match his tone. We both acted like everything was normal, like the night before hadn't happened. But the silence between words was louder than anything either of us said. At breakfast with his family, he joked around, made small talk, even teased his sister like usual. To anyone watching, we looked fine. But every time our eyes met across the table, one of us looked away. It wasn't anger or regret. It was confusion. The kind that settles deep in your chest and refuses to leave. After breakfast, we went down to the beach. The world looked freshly washed after the storm. Waves calmer, air crisp, the sand damp and cool under our feet. We carried the surfboards his dad had rented earlier in the week, but neither of us seemed interested in using them. Instead, we just walked along the shoreline, letting the waves lap at our ankles. He kicked at a shell and said, "Crazy storm last night." "Yeah," I said. "Didn't think it would clear up so fast." "Yeah, that was it." We kept walking, talking about nothing. How the sky looked bluer today. How we could probably get pizza later. It was polite conversation, like we were strangers, pretending to be friends. Inside, I felt like I was unraveling. Every time I tried to think about what had happened, the way his hand had brushed mine, the way everything had gone still afterward, I told myself it was meaningless, just a mistake, a moment of mixed signals, confusion. But if it was nothing, why did I keep replaying it in my head? What did it make my chest ache in a way I couldn't name? I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it couldn't. Because if it did, then what did that say about me? About us? That night, while his family went out to dinner, we stayed back again. I said I had a headache. He said he was tired. Both lies, but necessary ones. The room was dim lit, only by the muted glow from the street lights outside. He sat on his bed with a notebook, pretending to doodle. I sat by the window, pretending to watch the ocean. The only sound was the rhythmic crash of the waves below and the soft scratch of his pen. Finally, he broke the silence. "You've been quiet today. So, have you?" I said, still staring out the window. He didn't answer right away. "I've just been thinking about what?" He hesitated. "About last night." The words hit the air like a dropped glass. Froze. "What about it?" He set his pen down. "I don't know. It's just," he sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "I can't stop replaying it. I don't even know why. It wasn't bad or anything. Just unexpected." I turned around. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Same here." He looked up, and for the first time all day, our eyes actually met. "Did it freak you out?" I wanted to say no, but honesty slipped out before I could stop it. "A little." "Yeah," he said softly. "Me too." We both laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was just relief. Relief that neither of us had to keep pretending. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "You ever feel like life gives you this map of who you're supposed to be, but then you realize you don't even remember agreeing to it every day?" I said quietly. He nodded, like there are all these expectations, what you're supposed to want, who you're supposed to be attracted to, what kind of life you're supposed to have, and then something happens that doesn't fit the script, and suddenly you feel like you're breaking a rule no one warned you about. I turned from the window, resting my arms on my knees. "You think that's what we're doing? Breaking rules?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I'm starting to think that's not always a bad thing." The simplicity of it, how he said it like it was nothing, made something tighten in my chest. For a long while we just sat there, the air thick with the sound of The waves below and the occasional creak of the ceiling fan wasn't awkward anymore, just real. Can I ask you something? I said finally. He nodded. Did it mean anything to you last night? I mean, he thought about it. I don't. No. I don't think it was about that. He gestured vaguely as if searching for the right word. It was just human you. No, like for a second. All the noise stopped and it was just us. I let that sink in. I think I was just surprised. How okay it felt, he admitted. That caught me off guard. Yeah, I said, softly. Me too. We both laughed again. This time gentler, less nervous. The tension that had weighed on us all day started to ease. He stood up, walked to the window and leaned beside me, looking out at the moonlit ocean. You ever think maybe we're just figuring ourselves out? Like this doesn't have to mean anything bad or weird. It's just part of growing up. Yeah, I said maybe. It's just part of understanding what connection really means. He nodded. Exactly. The sound of the waves filled the space between us. The moon reflected off the water, rippling like liquid silver. For a moment, neither of us said anything. It felt safe standing there, beside him, sharing the same air. No, pretending left. He broke the silence with a small laugh. You know, I've spent years trying to be someone people like. But you never made me feel like I had to. I turned to him. That's because you don't. He smiled. That same quiet, half-shy smile I'd started to recognize as his most honest expression. Thanks, he said softly, for not making this weird. It's already weird, I said, grinning. But maybe that's okay, he chuckled under his breath. Yeah, maybe it is. We stayed like that for a while, watching the tide roll in. Every now and then our shoulders brushed. Not intentionally, but neither of us moved away. Eventually he sighed. This week's almost over. I know, I said. Kind of feels like we're leaving something behind or starting something new, I offered. He looked at me and for once there was no confusion in his eyes, just calm acceptance. Maybe both. The wind picked up, cool and gentle, carrying the faint smell of seaweed and rain. Somewhere down the beach, a lone figure walked by, their footsteps fading into the sand. I looked at him and realized that this conversation, this honesty was probably the most real thing I'd ever shared with anyone. No pretending, no labels, just two people standing on the edge of the unknown, quietly acknowledging it together. As we turned to head back toward the hotel, he said something I'd never forget. No, I don't think we need to figure this out right now. Maybe we just let it be whatever it is. I nodded, smiling faintly. Yeah, let it be. We walked in silence, our shadows stretching long behind us across the sand. The tide crept closer, washing away our footprints one by one, as if the ocean itself knew that some moments aren't meant to be defined, only remembered. Our last night arrived quietly, without fanfare or warning. The kind of night that slips in softly, pretending to be ordinary until you realize it's the one you'll remember most. The day had gone by in a blur. One last breakfast at the crowded cafe down the street. One last swim. One last half-hearted attempt to build a sand castle that collapsed under the first strong wave. We tried to act normal, to joke like we always had, but every laugh carried the weight of time running out. By evening, his family was packing things for the drive back in the morning. His mom asked if we wanted to walk down to the beach one last time before bed. We both said yes before she'd even finished asking. The air was cooler that night and the sky stretched endlessly above us, deep blue fading into black, speckled with stars that looked close enough to touch. The tide came in slow, whispering over the sand, dragging fragments of seashells and foam back with it. We didn't bring towels or phones, just hoodies and bare feet, wandering down to the shoreline where the moon painted the water silver. He walked a few steps ahead of me, hands in his pockets, the wind tugging at his hair. Hard to believe it's over, he said quietly. Yeah, I said. Feels like we just got here. We stood there for a while, watching the waves break and curl, glowing white beneath the moonlight. The sound filled every silence we didn't know how to fill ourselves. You excited for college? He asked finally. I think so, I said. Nervous though. Feels like everything's about to change. He nodded. Yeah, I keep telling myself it's just the next chapter, but I don't think I'm ready to turn the page yet. His words lingered, swept up by the wind, and carried out toward the horizon. He glanced at me, eyes soft. We're going to keep in touch, right? Of course, I said. You're not getting rid of me that easy. He smiled. Good. We both laughed, but it faded quickly. The night was too still for jokes to last. The sand was cold, underfoot smooth except where our footprints trailed behind us in uneven lines. We sat down side by side, knees pulled up, our sleeves brushing. The closeness didn't feel heavy anymore. Just felt real. For a while we didn't. The world was reduced to waves, stars, and the quiet rhythm of breathing. Then softly he said, "You ever think about how moments like this don't really come back?" I looked at him. Yeah, I think that's what makes them matter. He nodded slowly. Yes, that's true. He picked up a handful of sand, letting it slip through his fingers like water. Feels weird, doesn't it? Like something's ending, even though we're supposed to be at the beginning of everything. Maybe both, I said. He turned toward me then, and for a second the look in his eyes held something I couldn't quite read. Not sadness exactly, just depth. Understanding. This week, he said quietly, I don't know. It felt different. Not just because it's our last summer before college, but because he stopped, shaking his head. Never mind. Because what? I asked. He smiled a little, but it was tired. Because it felt real. I think I'll remember it for a long time. I wanted to say something, but something that could capture the strange mix of nostalgia and closeness that was knotting in my chest. But words felt too clumsy for it, so I just nodded. Me too. A long stretch of silence followed, broken only by the waves pulling at the shore. Somewhere down the beach, someone lit a small fire, and the flicker of orange danced faintly against the dark. He tilted his head back, eyes tracing the stars. You ever think about what people will remember about us? I smiled faintly. You mean, like at reunions? He chuckled. No, I mean people always leave impressions, right? I wonder what kind will leave. Thought about it. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter what people remember. Maybe it's just about the few moments we remember. The ones that make everything else fade. He looked over at me again. Eyes warm in the dark. Like this one. Yeah, I said softly. Like this one. It smiled, small, genuine. And it hit me then. Just how much had changed since the start of the week. How easy it had been before to categorize everything. Friendship, routine, familiarity, and how impossible it was now to fit any of it back into neat boxes. I didn't know if what I felt was love. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be called that. Maybe it was something smaller, quieter, a connection that lived somewhere between affection and something unnamed, something that didn't need to be explained to anyone else because it wasn't for anyone else to understand. He broke the silence. Again, his voice almost a whisper. You know what scares me the most about leaving? What? He hesitated, eyes still fixed on the ocean, forgetting what it feels like right now. Like this version of us. You won't, I said. Neither will I. He nodded slowly. I hope not. The tide crept closer, washing over our feet. The water cold but comforting. For a second I thought about reaching out. About the way his hand had felt that night when it brushed against mine. But I didn't. I didn't need to. The space between us already felt full of everything we hadn't said. We stayed there for a long time, long enough for the fire down the beach to burn out and for the stars to start dimming. As dawn hinted at the horizon, the air grew cooler, and when he finally stood, he brushed the sand from his sleeves and said quietly, we should probably head back. Yeah, I said, getting to my feet. We walked back without speaking, side by side, the wet sand giving way under each step. When we reached the hotel stairs, he paused, looking back at the beach one last time. Crazy how fast a week goes, he said. Yeah, I whispered. Crazy. Inside the room, we both moved slowly, like people trying to make a moment last. He packed a few things into his bag before setting it aside. Then, standing by the light switch, he looked at me and said, guess this is it, huh? I smiled faintly. Guess so? He nodded, then hesitated. Hey, he said softly. Yeah, thanks for this week, for everything. Same, I said. He smiled again, but this time his eyes lingered on mine a little longer. Good night, he said finally, though neither of us wanted it to end. Good night. When he turned off the light, the room went dark except for the faint moonlight slipping through the blinds. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing on the other side of the room. The sound of the ocean outside matched the rhythm of it. Gentle, constant, familiar. Sleep came in fragments. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of water and laughter, of footprints in the sand that disappeared too soon. Morning came with the sound of luggage zippers and distant gulls. The air smelled like coffee and ocean wind. His parents were bustling around, loading the car. I folded my last t-shirt, tucked it into my bag, and tried to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. He was quieter than usual, but calm. When it was time to leave, his mom hugged me, thanking me for coming. His sister waved from the back seat. He stood by the passenger door, one hand on the frame, looking at me like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. So, he said, finally, I'll text you when we get there. Yeah, I said, smiling. Do that. He nodded once. Take care. All right, you too. And then he got in the car. The engine started, tires crunching over gravel. I stood on the curb, hands in my pockets, as the car rolled down the street and disappeared around the corner. The wind blew through the empty parking lot, lifting the edge of my hoodie. The world felt bigger, louder, lonelier. I turned back toward the hotel where the sound of waves still drifted faintly through the morning air. The same ocean, the same horizon, but something in me was different now. I didn't know if what we had was love, confusion, or something in between, but it was real and it changed me. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and brings more stories like this to life. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next story about love, friendship, and everything in between. And before you go, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? I love seeing how far our little storytelling community reaches across the world.